Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, December 2nd, 2025. Time in Texas, about 4 p.m. Some of my sources are God in the Bible, Patriot Subscriber, SpaceWeather.com, NOAA and NASA, BREITBART, Hal Turner, New York Prepper, Plus, Martin Armstrong and BPEARTHWATCH. Some of the things I'll cover. X2 is going to give us a G2. Plus, there's a possibility for a CARRINGTON event. We have B-52's now flying over the north coast of Venezuela. Zelensky tries to blackmail the U.S., especially the Congress. And President Trump has cut communications to the European Union. And we would wonder, does that include NATO? Because aren't they synonymous? So we're going to begin by talking about what's going on in space. And apparently it's revving up to be something significant. So we have, coming off of the sun, we have a current several sunspots close together. I think that's 90, well, I'll get the number in a minute. But this sunspot complex is 90% of the sunspot size that caused the CARRINGTON event. The CARRINGTON event took place in 1859 and destroyed all technology existing at that time, which primarily was telegraph wires. Several telegraph operators were actually electrocuted by the electricity flowing through the telegraph wires. A CARRINGTON-like event today could take down power grids, certainly satellites, cell phones, internet, and so on. Virtually taking the Earth globally back to the Stone Age. So what we have going on, and BPEARTHWATCH came out yesterday and said CERN, and it's widely believed that CERN is operated by the deep state, has turned on full force, which has led to a significant decrease in the Earth's electromagnetic shield, and that shield has been going down in strength for decades. I know since the 1990s when I studied it in college. And with a weakened electromagnetic shield around the Earth, it lets in more of the Earth's radiation and proton storms and so on. So we have this today from SpaceWeather.com, NOAA. December 1, yesterday, we had a 2.0 X flare. On November 30, we had a 1.9 X flare. The 2.0 yesterday did launch a CME, which it's believed will hit the Earth tomorrow, December 3rd, and cause a G2 level geomagnetic storm. And it is NOAA who is bringing out this information about the CARRINGTON event and comparing the sunspot that caused the CARRINGTON event to this complex of sunspots currently now rotating, facing the Earth, numbers 4294 through 4296, and notes that it's 90% as large as the sunspot that caused the CARRINGTON event. For some reason, NOAA is bringing out this information. So we need to pray against any cataclysmic space events and impacts on the Earth. Now, along with increased sun activity, increased sun spots and energy hitting the Earth, historically has correlated to big changes in the economy and certainly the war cycle. And we are seeing that today, particularly with Venezuela, South America, and Mexico. And we have this coming out today, December 2nd. We had B-52's flying out of Minot in, I believe, North Dakota, down to the a small island off of the north coast of Venezuela, accompanied by F-18 fighter jets that were launched from the Caribbean from the Gerald Ford Carrier Strike Group. Venezuela then immediately complained to the U.S. government. So that went on today. The B-52's and the F-18's were turning their transponders off and on to minimize flight tracking. And we have this. We have that China. On November 26, we know that China is embedded in Venezuela, and China is heavily China is embedded in Venezuela as well as Canada, and most likely has operatives in the U.S. in various locations, and is heavily engaged with the cartels in the drug trade, trafficking, and so on into the U.S. Many hits have been made by the FBI, DEA, ICE, U.S. Marshals, state law enforcement on multiple drug cartel hubs inside the U.S. since September. The CCP now is threatening Japan. And let's recall, on the many islands of Japan are located 23 U.S. military bases. The CCP now is threatening Japan, which means it's literally threatening the U.S. military in Japan, that they're going to hit the Japanese islands of Honshu, Kushi, Hokkaido nuclear power plants. And the CCP has a plan for the launching of their drones or bombs to hit Japan, and this would certainly hit the U.S. military in Japan. They plan to launch from China and North Korea. So that's going on. I believe these threats by China to Japan is really a threat to the U.S. military in response to President Trump going after the cartels and now setting up to militarily hit most likely Mexico, but definitely Venezuela. And we have this. Hal Turner reported November 18 that the EU, in gearing up to provide troops and equipment to Ukraine, would take an astonishing 45 days to do so. And yesterday, December 1, NATO, a general of NATO, made a public statement threatening to do a preemptive strike on Russia, presumably from Europe. So we see NATO and the EU going completely out of bounds. And we have this. December 1, yesterday, Zelensky, it's presumed, communicated with the U.S. government for a message to be given to President Trump that Zelensky would go public with all the traitors inside the U.S. government and Congress especially, who have been benefiting from kickbacks from the U.S. money going to Ukraine where it was laundered and then going back to the campaign funds or directly into the pockets, certainly of members of Congress. So Zelensky threatens blackmail extortion. That happened yesterday about 5 p.m., at which time President Trump then held an emergency security meeting in the White House. It's believed to discuss both Ukraine and Venezuela. Today, December 2nd, President Trump had sent his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, along with his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to Moscow to meet with President Putin. And also, within the past 24 hours, I just went over the EU, NATO, is making a threat to Russia to do a preemptive strike. President Trump has directed the Pentagon to cut off all communications with the Defense Ministry of Germany. President Trump believes that neither NATO nor the EU can be trusted with confidential information regarding peace talks between President Trump and President Putin. So, to NATO and the EU and Germany, no more information from the White House and the Pentagon. And we have this today, December 2nd. President Trump makes a public statement. President Putin made a public statement. That was in response to NATO, EU threatening to do a preemptive strike on Russia. Now, President Putin responds to NATO, EU. Russia is ready for war if NATO and the EU begin one. And President Putin accuses the European Union of trying to sabotage peace talks between Russia and the U.S. And that correlates to the action we saw President Trump taking in cutting off communications with the Defense Ministry of Germany. And today, so President Putin made that public statement in response to the NATO-EU threat. And then after that public statement, he was going into a meeting with President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. So that's going on right now. And we have this Depot's aggregate site, Martin Armstrong, globally famous economist, regarding Maduro. Now, from Hal Turner, we had received information that President Trump, like a week ago, and the offer expired this past Friday, gave Maduro a week to leave Venezuela with his wife and son. We know that President Trump had placed a NOTAM, a no-fly area, over all of Venezuela. The plan was for Maduro and his family to fly to the border with Brazil, get out of the plane, walk across the border of Brazil, and get on another plane where it's believed he and his family would go to Iran, who has offered him asylum. From Martin Armstrong today, December 2nd, Maduro refuses to flee, and he wants another phone call with President Trump, and he wants to stay in power for another 18 months. So that's going on. And we have this from New York Prepper, December 2nd today. President Trump has made a public statement that the U.S. military will engage in land hits on cartels beginning soon. And, as I said, we had B-52's and F-18s flying near the coast of Venezuela. And New York Prepper also reports we had an unusual number of Poseidon and AWACS surveillance planes in that area. We have doomsday planes now up over the U.S. President Trump has rejected Maduro's demands. Maduro wanted President Trump to give Maduro and all of his cabinet and government members global amnesty for anything they had done in the past. And Maduro then wanted to appoint his successor out of his current cabinet, who would then be part of the election process coming up. President Trump rejected all of Maduro's demands. And we have this from New York Prepper. Yeah, the offer for Maduro and his family to get out of Venezuela expired last Friday. Maduro is requesting another phone call. We have this: Norway and Sweden give no travel advisories to their citizens in going to Venezuela. Spain is warning its pilots of a NOTAM at all levels over Venezuela and to avoid it due to in the near future military action. And we have this: President Trump has also made this public statement: any country smuggling drugs into the U.S. is on President Trump's list for similar actions as he is taking and directing the U.S. military right now against Venezuela. And we, the people, say to President Trump, we support you in this effort. So this concludes my flash. I love you, and I'll see you soon.